Hey, I'm Bob at ILikeToMakeStuff. Today I'm going to show you how to make this 4 in a row game. I got 2 sheets of fluorescent acrylic from Inventables. They have lots of different colors, and out of each sheet I cut 21 circles. Now if you don't want to use acrylic or you don't have a CNC, you could also use a 1-inch dowel and cut it into slices that are a 1/4 inch thick. Then I cut down 2 sheets of 1/8 inch plywood to size. In Illustrator I made a pattern for where the circles and the dividers go, and then used some spray adhesive to attach the pieces of wood and the pattern. You can cut the holes out with a 3/4 inch bit on your drill press or use a CNC machine if you've got it around. Either one works. Then sand down both sides of each piece. I found it was easy to use a sleeve from a spindle sander to get the inside of the circles. Use 3/4 inch just like the holes. Next I ripped some 1/8 inch strips from 1/4 inch material. Then I cut down pieces a little bit taller than the board itself. These don't have to be too specific because they're going to get sanded down later. I attached the strips starting with the bottom one with wood glue, but I put a dot of CA glue on the ends and right in the center. This will hold the wood in place while the wood glue dries without having to use any clamps. I did the same thing for all the vertical dividers. When you're putting these in place, make sure to double check that they're far enough apart so that your pieces can slide up and down easily. You could use a ruler and measure placement, but it seemed to work out pretty well just using the pieces. Before I glued it together, I went ahead and coated the inside faces with white paint. After that dried, I had to go back and sand them down a little bit so that the glue could hold the 2 pieces together. Having the surfaces painted, wood glue would not work very well here, so I tried CA glue, and I was actually surprised at how well it's holding. Before the final paint job, I took it to the disc sander and trimmed off those extra pieces, as well as cleaned up all the edges to make sure everything was nice and smooth. With that done, I ripped down a piece of 1/4 inch stock down to 3.5 inches wide, then set up a stop block to cut 6-inch sections of it. I lowered the table saw blade to the exact thickness of the wood, and then I stacked all the pieces together and clamped them. I set up a stop block 3 inches from the far side of the blade. This way I could nibble away the wood and be sure to stop exactly at the halfway point. Then I flipped it over and kept it clamped, and did the exact same thing on the opposite corner. Keeping all the faces aligned, I went back and sanded the areas that I had just cut to smooth them out. Now if you've got your cuts right in the middle, it should fit together as a box just like this. Mine worked pretty well, and then I added glue to glue it all together. I also added glue in places that I didn't really need to, and I had to clean it up later, but it's not a big deal. With it all glued up, I added clamps to hold the whole thing together while the glue dried. I also wiped off some of the excess glue that I didn't need, just so I wouldn't have to deal with it later on. I cut down 2 squares that fit in the ends of the box, and then glued them in. I had to loosen up the clamps a little bit to be able to get them in there, but then once I flushed them up with my finger, put the clamps back on. After the whole thing dried, I was able to take the clamps off and I had a nice solid box. Then I sanded down each face until the joints were perfectly smooth. Next I took it to the table saw and cut it. I didn't need the middle section. I wanted the width of the box, but not the depth of the box. So I basically cut the middle out. Now this is a little bit scary to do, so use push sticks if you do this. I had to do a little bit of sanding to get these faces clean. Laying them together, I made a couple of marks just for reference, and then I found the center of each piece and made a mark. Then I used a punch on the line, but slightly to the inside of the box. I used a smaller bit to make a pilot hole on each one of these marks. I didn't want the full-size bit to wander when it drilled the hole because I didn't want to tear up the outside face of the box. I made matching marks on the game board itself and then used a punch to mark them. Since the material was thicker, there's no reason to do a pilot, so I just drilled the holes out. I mixed a really small amount of 2-part epoxy. After it was thoroughly mixed, I put a drop into each one of the holes that I had drilled. I got some rare earth magnets from the home center and dropped each one into a hole, making sure to have the polarity of the magnet facing the right direction, and to have them push down flush with the surface. I did the same thing with the game board. This epoxy cures in about 8 minutes, so while I was waiting on that, I added a coat of finish to the box. This is a linseed oil and beeswax finish that I got from Lynn at Darwin Orver. You should definitely check it out. I'll put a link in the description. So here it is, all done. So as a proof of concept, I think it worked really well. There's some stuff in the execution that I should do differently if I'm going to do another one of these. One, I should use solid wood instead of plywood, and then I wouldn't have to paint it. Part of the reason I painted it was because you could see the plies and the woods just didn't match. And by using a solid wood, it would just end up looking a lot nicer and it would match the outside more. And all being wood, that would make the pieces pop even more. The placement of the magnets needs to be a lot more precise than what I did. It works, it stands up, the box closes fine, but if you look really closely, you can see that it didn't fully match on the bottom, and so there's a little bit of rocking if you move it. Now it's not going to knock it over or anything, it's not a big deal, but for precision you would probably want to spend a little bit more time trying to match up exactly where the magnet holes were. Now one thing I really like about this project is that the entire thing could be done on a CNC if you wanted to, or the entire thing could be done without a CNC. It gives you a lot of options when you start to think about the types of materials that you could use and how important the precision of things like these are. You know, if it's not really that important for these to be perfectly spaced apart, you can do it by hand and it works just fine. If the precision is the more important thing to you, then a CNC will help you get that precision in this type of setup. I just say that to encourage you, because if you don't have a CNC or some expensive piece of machinery, that doesn't mean that you can't do certain projects. You just have to come up with creative ways to use the tools that you have, and you can probably execute the exact same thing. If you like this project, let me know in the comments below or at ILikeToMakeStuff.com, where you can also get one of these awesome new t-shirts that I just got in. I have a lot more stuff for you to check out, and if you like these videos and you want to help me do more of them, there's a lot of ways you can support down here. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you're well. See you next time.